with our formal meeting. Welcome.
Oh, look who's chairing.
I am honored to be able to conduct the formal meeting. Is a tradition that we rotated through council members, but we hadn't done that since COVID, so this is my first time doing so, bear with me. But welcome. We are grateful that you are able to join us today virtually and, of course, in person. Thank you for your patience as we continue navigating the COVID situation and trying to make the best decisions to keep people safe. If you are here joining us on site, the council continues to take precautions to reduce the transmission of COVID-19 and maintain healthy work environments. While masking requirements have changed and we are still balancing the safety of everyone who may join us in person, and will continue to evolve as needed. For now, masks are not required in city facilities. However, of course, if you are here in person to give public comment and you prefer to wear a face mask, you are welcome to do so. Feel free to remove your mask after your name is called and speak into the microphones to address the council. Thank you. And the first thing on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone who's joining us tonight. Oh, my microphone wasn't on. Welcome to everyone who's joining us tonight. If you're joining us for the public comment opportunities later on the agenda, we are accepting your comments in person and also through WebEx, as well as for those who only have the option to call in. Staff will be monitoring a separate telephone line. Before we begin moving through the agenda, I want to mention and review our rules of decorum. These are guidelines that the City Council has always had in place to help our meeting progress in an orderly, civil, and efficient way so that everyone has the opportunity to voice their opinions without feeling intimidated. In order to achieve this, our rules of decorum begin from the moment you arrive in our meeting. We respect all points of view and we welcome new insights. While giving your comments, please be respectful. Avoid yelling, profanity, or making racial slurs, obscene, or defamatory remarks. If you violate this rule, your line will be muted or you will be asked to stop. If you feel you need to use profanity or disrespectful remarks to express your point, you're welcome to email council members or call our comment line to leave a message. In addition, our staff will request your name during the WebEx registration process. To limit disruption, your name cannot include a message or violate our rules of decorum. If your name doesn't meet this requirement, then our staff will make contact with you to gather that information. For those joining in WebEx, please monitor your chat in case we try to reach you. Isaac Canedo from our staff is helping to moderate the WebEx portion of our meeting and will be messaging with the attendees to coordinate on any questions with your registration. Staff is handling a lot of tasks at once, so please limit messages to technical issues and minimal changes to your registration. And additionally, if you'd like to send any additional comments or if you're unable to finish in your 2-minute time, please feel free to reach us by mail at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or email at council.comments@slcgov.com, or call 801-535-7654. Okay, so that brings us to item A4. Item A4 is the approval of the minutes from our work session meetings of May 4th, 2021, March 1st, 2022, and March 8th, 2022, as well as the formal meeting minutes of March 1st, 2022. I'll look for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler and a second from Councilmember Pui. I need to roll call this, right?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
Pui?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Peter Eschler?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes unanimously with Councilmember Valdemoros absent. Moving on to section B, which is our public hearing section. Items B1 through B6 will be heard as one public hearing. Let's see. Scott Corpany on our staff will be calling the names of those who wish to comment. We will call names of people joining on WebEx and in person based on the order of registration or received comment cards. Once we open public comment, Scott will announce 3 names at a time so that people will have some notice and be prepared to speak. When it is your turn to speak, Scott will announce your name. For people in WebEx, he will unmute your line and you may begin. For people in person, please step up to the podium and make your comment into the microphone. Once you begin, please state your name and the 2-minute timer will start. At the 2-minute mark, staff will announce time. If you are unable to finish your comment, please send the rest of your comment via email, mail, or call our office. Our contact information is posted in the meeting room or in the WebEx chat, and I read it earlier. If you do not wish to speak, please either message our staff or when staff states your name, just let us know that you're just here to listen. So our first public, yes.
Can I announce how many people are?
Oh, yes, please.
So, Mr. Chair, for the benefit of people who are joining us online who can't see how many people are registered to speak, we currently have 8 people registered to speak in the various comments this evening, and excuse me, a handful in the room. Sorry.
Thank you. So the first public hearing is items B1 through B6. Before we begin taking comments, I'll first turn the time over to Sylvia Richards, a council staff policy analyst, to give us a short introduction to these items. Sylvia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The city applies for and receives grants which help to support and fund some city programs. Each grant application is reviewed and then receives a public hearing, which gives the public an opportunity to comment on them. Tonight, there are 6 grants. First is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Grant, which would fund the reduction of seismic and flooding hazards at the City Creek Water Treatment Plant. Second is the Assistance to Firefighters Grant, which would fund the purchase of wildland firefighting personnel protective equipment. Third, Innovating for Effective Service Delivery State Justice Institute Grant, which would be used to identify and implement best practices and programs to better serve the unsheltered, underserved, and vulnerable populations at the Justice Court. Fourth is the Utah State Cancer Plan Implementation Grant, which would fund the purchase of air filters and air purifiers for at-risk populations on the west side. Fifth, the Bureau of Emergency Service and Preparedness Per Capita Grant, which would fund the purchase of medical supplies for the fire department. And sixth, Paul Coverdell Forensic Science Improvement Subaward Grant, which would fund the annual accreditation fee for the police department's crime lab for 2022. Again, these are items the city has applied for to fund city programs and projects. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And now we will open the public hearings. Scott? Or Isaac?
Thank you, Council Chair. We do not have anyone here to speak to this item.
And no one here in person is wanting to speak to the item? All right. So I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and refer items B1 through B6 to a future consent agenda for action.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Dugan and a second from Councilmember Wharton, I guess. I'll roll call that. Councilmember Dugan?
Yes.
Peter Eschler?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
Pui?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That's unanimous with Councilmember Valdemoros' absence. Okay, that moves us on to our second public hearing, which is item B7. Item B7 is an ordinance regarding stealth tower text amendments. And before we begin taking comment, I will turn the time to Brian Fulmer, another council staff policy analyst, to give us a short introduction. Brian, are you online? Oh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposal to amend the Salt Lake City zoning ordinance to allow stealth wireless towers up to 75 feet as a conditional use in the public lands zoning district citywide. The request is associated with the applicant's proposal to build a stealth tower at the Pioneer Police Precinct at 1040 West, 700 South, but the requested amendment would apply to all properties with the public land zoning designation throughout the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And with that, Scott, will you please introduce the public commenters?
Thank you, Council Chair. We have 2 people to speak to this item. The first is Melissa Regan, and the second is George Chapman. Melissa, you are You'll be unmuted shortly. Just a moment here.
We need just a minute to figure out some technical issues with relating to unmuting that person, so we may switch to the next person.
Are we going to George Chapman then?
Scott, can you let us know?
It does not look like George is in the chat. Is he present in person?
I believe he's a call-in user.
So he would be under the phone line of council staff. Weaver?
All right, just a moment here.
We're having some issues unmuting that call-in line as well. Can you give us just a minute to troubleshoot some technical issues? Sorry about that.
I wish I had some good jokes to tell or something, but do we, yeah, we don't want to move on to the next item?
think-
It's the same issue.
I think because it's a
Okay.
public hearing, you kind of have to.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, everyone, as we deal with some technical issues. It is one of the things we learned during COVID was that some people, because of the WebEx option and the virtual option, some people engage with our meetings that didn't typically. So we're doing every effort we can to allow for in-person and virtual commenters, but sometimes it does lead to issues like this. So thanks for your patience.
All right, apologies for that. We should have everything set correctly now, and we'll go back to Melissa Reagan. Melissa, you are now unmuted.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Melissa Reagan, I serve as outside counsel to Verizon Wireless and with the law firm of Sherman and Howard, 675 15th Street in Denver, Colorado. Today, we submitted a detailed letter and presentation in support of Verizon Wireless's proposed text amendment, and we hope that you will take the time to review these materials before the City Council takes formal action on this matter. Since August of 2020, Verizon Wireless has been attempting to work with the city planning staff to draft a text amendment that will allow wireless providers to deploy facilities up to 75 feet in public land zones, and in particular, a 60-foot facility in the Pioneer Precinct. Currently, as drafted, wireless providers cannot deploy facilities taller than 35 feet in these public land zones, except for two specific types of stealth facilities, church steeples and light poles at sports fields. So if there's not a church or a sports fields in the zone, or if there is one, but the church or the city is not willing to allow wireless providers on their property, there is no alternative for deployment greater than 35 feet. And as you'll see in our materials we presented, that's just not possible with these macro facilities. So without this text amendment or approval of a specific application for the facility, Verizon Wireless will be effectively prohibited from providing the wireless services under the Federal Telecommunications Act. And in particular, it will materially inhibit us from providing services to the Pioneer Police Precincts for emergency services and in this area of the city in which needs improved services for equitable wireless services. So we hope that you'll consider adopting the proposed text amendment or amend it to address the concerns raised by the city planning staff rather than denying it. We are available to answer any questions the City Council may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Melissa. Our next commenter is George.
George, you are unmuted.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, George.
Oh, okay. I urge you not to approve the ordinance. Finally, this city has leverage against cell phone companies, specifically the 5G towers. Think of all of the complaints that you, attending community councils, get and have. You have to keep saying you don't have any say. The council and mayor doesn't have any say. Well, guess what? Now you have something to say, and not just something to say, but leverage. So I'm asking you not to pass the text amendment and demand a negotiation. People that are being forced to have a cell tower in their front yard, even on a park strip, should have free 5G. You should have security cameras on them to go to the Salt Lake Police Department. You should have a graffiti removal system that is important and is being ignored right now. So this is a chance for this city to demand respect from the cell phone companies. Don't pass this ordinance, text amendment, and negotiate with the city, with the cell phone companies. So this is really important. Also because schools are in public lands, area designation, I don't think the schools really should be getting cell phone towers because we've already had a lot of complaints by people that are getting them. They shouldn't be at schools. You'll get too much of a fight. So bottom line, don't pass the text amendment. It's time to get the respect this city deserves, and you should be negotiating for better from the cell phone companies. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, George. Scott, do we have any other comments to this item?
There are no other comments to this item.
Okay.
Mr.
Great.
Chair,
Yes.
I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
Great. I have a motion from Councilmember Puy and a second from Councilmember Dugan. I will roll call this. Councilmember Wharton.
Sorry, this is
This
just
is
to
closing
close.
the public
Yes.
hearing and deferring action.
Yes, I vote yes.
Okay, thanks. Puy,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Peter-Eschler,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Valdemoros absent. We are now on item B8. B8 is a zoning map amendment at Western Gardens, which is 550 South 600 East. Before we begin taking comments, we will again turn the time over to Brian Fulmer, one of our council staff policy analysts, to give us an introduction to this item. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposal to amend the zoning map for property at 550 South 600 East from its current neighborhood commercial designation to form-based neighborhood district 2. As you mentioned, Western Garden Center is currently located on the property. The request would facilitate redevelopment of the property into a multifamily project. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, Scott, will you please introduce our first commenters? And also, do we have an idea of how many are here to speak to this item?
We have about,
Council Chair, we
sorry,
have
Scott, go
3
ahead.
people to speak to this item. The first is Cindy Cromer, who's there in person, followed by Mark Shanbrun, who's also in person, and then William Richardson. Cindy, you may start.
Great. Good to see you, Cindy.
I don't know if that microphone is, sorry, Cindy. I don't know if that microphone's on, so let's double check that.
While we're waiting for the second technological problem of the evening. No, I just want to tell you, this, not for the record, that I have missed these halls. What I learned during the shutdown was that most of the things I accomplished were accomplished in the hallways.
The halls have missed you, Cindy. What if we took comment from the table? Is that an option? Cindy, are you comfortable sitting at the table and giving your comment in those
being in the
microphones?
box, to be honest with you. Okay, so I'm still Cindy Cromer, and at your meeting on March the 22nd, I spoke to you about the problematic FBUN2 zone. Jack Davis, a property owner near Western Gardens, has written you at length. This afternoon, I forwarded a letter from the Ballpark Community Council opposing the use of this zone on Main Street. In 2016, a group of zoning geeks, I was part of it, began telling your predecessors on the council about the problems with the FBUN2. Now your constituents in Central 9th and Ballpark have joined the resistance to this zone. Why is the city, like Goldilocks, trying to find the right size and the right temperature, searching for correct zoning unsuccessfully? I have the answer. I ruminated about this. Because our thinking about zoning dates from two time frames, from the late 1980s and early 1990s, when nothing was happening in this town. We were desperately trying to get something moving in the city. We even had time for long-range planning back then. And also from the post-Great Recession era, and as a result, we have zones like this FBUN2 from the early 2010s, which focus on jump-starting development. We don't need to jump-start development anymore. Our zoning tools are now completely out of sync with the current context for development in the city, and the zones that we thought we needed, such as FBUN2, are like pouring gasoline on a fire. The tools we have are your responsibility. I cannot file a petition to fix the FBUN2 zone. If I could, the first thing I would do would be to prohibit its use in a residential historic district. As I said to the council in 2016 and again to you on March 22nd, you are dumping a zoning issue on the design review process at the Landmarks Commission. And because very few of you were around then, the work session for Trolley Square Ventures, the FBUN2,
That's time.
was 5 hours long.
Thank you, Cindy, for your comment. Mark? Is it Shanburton?
Mark Shanbrun should be up next.
Shanbrun?
It's working now.
Hello? It does work. Thank you. My name is Mark Shanburn. I live at 539 East Hawthorne Avenue. My property borders Western Gardens, probably the largest border of any of the houses on Hawthorne Avenue. And as we look forward, I want to take you back 4 or 5 years when Moda Newhouse was built and there was a huge fire started by a disgruntled employee. And previous to that, I was here and fought about moving the property back about 90 feet. They did. Had they not, all of Hawthorne would have been gone, been burnt up. So I start there and think about what's going to happen with this proposal at Western Gardens. With a barrier of 30 feet from my house would certainly not be enough space if there were a fire. Never mind speaking of taking my view and also the beautiful neighbor I have right now, which is a nursery of trees and plants and vegetables. Couldn't ask for anything better. But I know there's progress. So going from that nursery and trees to a possible 3 or 4 story building, I really ask that you look at this and see, is this progress or is this going backwards and making the neighbors on Hawthorne not very happy? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Scott, do we have another commenter?
We have William Richardson next, but he appears to be having difficulties. So
Should we
if he's
wait a
able
minute?
to come back, we can add him to general comment.
So we have one more commenter, but they're having technical difficulties. So William, if you would still like to make a comment, please join us for our general comments later on in the in the meeting, and we will be happy to listen to your comments regarding this proposal. So with that, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting, and we'll take his comment at the generals. So,
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion from Councilmember Dugan and a second from Councilmember Fowler. I will roll call this. Councilmember Peter-Eschler,
Yes.
Dugan,
yes.
Wharton,
Yes.
Pui,
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that passes unanimously with Councilmember Valdemoros absent. Okay, on to Section C of our agenda. Section C is potential action items, and the first item is the potential rezone at 2333 West North Temple Street.
And Mr.
I will look for a motion.
Chair, I move that the council adopt the ordinance subject to the property owner entering into a development agreement with the city that includes the following condition. Any new development or substantial remodel of existing development on the subject property shall be constructed with air circulation systems of at least 30 dBs of sound attenuation in sleeping areas and at least 25 dBs of sound attenuation elsewhere.
Second.
Great. I have a motion from Councilmember Dugan, a second from Councilmember Pui. Is there any discussion to this motion? Okay, I will roll call that. Councilmember Pui,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Peter-Eschler,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
Wharton,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That passes unanimously with Councilmember Valdemoros absent. And that is our only potential action item, so that takes us to Section D. Section D is comments. First, any comments to the mayor or questions to the mayor from the city council?
I just want to say thank you, Mayor, for last night's iftar celebration. It was a wonderful celebration, and thank you for inviting the council to that celebration. And I appreciate all your effort and engagement across the community and all the different groups. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you, Councilmember Dugan, and thank you, Mayor. I think the reason we don't have comments is because you're so gracious to give us a lot of updates at the work session meeting. So we have a lot of our questions already answered, but thank you. Okay, the next comment item is comments to the City Council. This is the general comment portion of our agenda for comments about general topics and items that are not scheduled for a public hearing. And of course, that one commenter that had technical difficulties is welcome to join us and give a comment on that last agenda item for the rezone. I went over the City Council's rules of decorum earlier, and those rules still apply here. We are accepting your comments in person and through WebEx, and for those joining virtually, and also as a call-in option for people for whom that is their only option. Isaac Canedo from our staff is still helping to moderate the meeting and can message with attendees if you need to coordinate. Scott Corpany on our staff will be calling names of those who wish to comment based on the order of registration or received comment cards. Once we open public comment, Scott will announce 3 names at a time so that people can have some notice and be prepared to speak. When it is your turn to speak, Scott will announce your name. For people in WebEx, he will unmute your line and you may begin. For people in person, please step up to the podium to make your comment into the microphone. Once you begin, please state your name and the 2-minute timer will start. At the 2-minute mark, the host will announce time and your microphone will be muted. If you are unable to finish your comment, please send the rest of your comment via email, mail, or by calling our office. Our contact information is posted in the meeting room or in the WebEx chat. If you do not wish to speak, please either message our staff or when the host states your name, just let us know that you're here to listen. Scott, can you please begin with our first general comments?
We have 6 people to speak to general comment. First, Nathan London, followed by Carl Letamendi, followed by Polly Hart. First up is Nathan. You are unmuted.
Thank you very much. My name is Nathan London. My comment is not regarding any of the items previously discussed today, but it is a matter I hope the City Council can help me with. The Salt Lake City Division of Transportation recently broke ground on a new construction project in the park strip near 300 North and 900 West. This is across the sidewalk from my home, which I purchased in Salt Lake City last year. The construction company was nice enough to halt construction until I was able to voice my concerns, and the project remains at a halt today without concrete being poured. I was not notified of this proposed location for the new bus stop, and therefore could not voice my concerns to this construction, which is within 20 feet of my front door and about 8 feet from my mailbox. If the project continues, I stand to lose potential resale value and a loss of my family's quality of life. I adopted my niece and nephew recently and fear for my children having to open our front door every day when they leave for school, as the area I live in has a higher crime rate than many parts of the city and a higher homeless population who may use the site as a community gathering spot. I feel that this increases the likelihood that my residents could be subject to a higher risk of crime, vandalism, and a loss of privacy, and I'd like to request that the council provide any assistance they can to stop work on this project in the division to find a more suitable location for the proposed bus stop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Scott, who is our next commenter?
Next up, we have Carl Letamendi, followed by Polly Hart, followed by George Chapman. Carl, you are unmuted.
Great, thank you very much. Actually, signing up for public comment may have been a mistake, so I apologize for that. I don't have anything relevant to contribute to the conversation, but this is Carl Letamendi, moved to Rose Park from New York City 2 years ago, first time joining these meetings, and I'm just looking to get a little bit more involved, and we'll be popping in, so thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Carl, for joining us. Appreciate your engagement, and welcome to Salt Lake City.
Right, next up is Polly Hart, followed by George Chapman, followed by Justin Martin. Polly, you are unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Polly Hart. I am the chair of the Peanut Board, Parks and Public Lands. I sent you all a letter on March 8th on behalf of the Peanut Board, but I wanted to get ahead. I know that you are not having public comment yet on Reimagine Nature, but I wanted to get ahead of the game and reiterate that the board unanimously voted to recommend that the council and the mayor accept the Reimagine Nature Salt Lake City document. We support Nancy Monteith and Park and Public Lands' tremendous work with great enthusiasm. We look forward to its implementation. And on a side note, I joined Nancy on her outreach at Memory Grove, and it was really fun. So kudos to the Parks and Public Lands Department. I now take off my peanut hat and speak as a citizen. As many of you know, I am not afraid to be critical of staff when I feel that it is genuinely due. And that's probably an understatement. But I also like to give credit when credit is due. And I'm truly grateful to the Parks and Public Lands staff for working diligently with all Foothills Trails users and making the effort to hear everyone's concerns. I'm still optimistic that off-leash will eventually become a part of the Foothills Trails system above the avenues in Capitol Hill. And I just want to say thank you for hearing us. As long as I have 16 seconds, stealth towers, I strongly suggest against that. 75 feet is ridiculously high. It's like a 7-story building, and it's just not appropriate. Thank you for all you do every day.
Thank you, Polly. Thanks for your service to the Peanut Board, and you sure maximized your time. George.
All right, George Chapman, and followed by Justin Martin, and finally William Richardson. George, you are unmuted.
The city has a lack of 18,000 of... Hello?
George, will you restart? We couldn't hear the first few sentences.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Please stop the city staff from having important meetings during city council Tuesday meetings like today. And on another subject, this afternoon you heard the city has a lack of 18,000 affordable housing units in the city, and we have a 40% increase in rent in 1 year. That should have been a wake-up call but this city has ignored wake-up calls for almost 10 years that I know of. So now we have million-dollar homes, which is normal in this city, and with all due respect, $450,000 homes are not in any way affordable. That's not the solution. The only solution is opening up, sorry, you've heard this before, but the only solution is opening up the tens of thousands of acres in West Salt Lake to mixed income and mixed density housing. And if you try to increase density in single-family home areas, keep in mind those streets and the housing were designed for lower density. If you try to rezone them, it's going to start a fight that I've seen last for decades, literally decades. Homeowners will fight zoning increases next to rail stations for decades. And on another subject, shared housing discussed this afternoon is not a respectful solution for low income because it assumes poor should all be in one building. That's wrong. And heads up, ADUs don't require impact fees now, and they're not a solution because Airbnb is using them and they have significant negative impact. And finally, Nathan is right. We had to call law enforcement to bus stops when kids were there because drug users were attracted to the bus stop and scared the kids. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, George. Scott, can you call our next commenter?
And it looks like George was the last one. We have no one else who has waited until the end of the comments.
None of these young people here want to give us a comment on anything? Thank you for joining our meeting. That takes us to Section E on our agenda. Section E is new business, and we have one new business item, which is E1, regarding an annexation at approximately Rose Park Lane and 2350 North, otherwise known as Hunter's Stables. I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council accept a petition to annex a parcel of land at 2350 North Rose Park Lane for further consideration.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Dugan and a second from Councilmember Pui. Is there any discussion to this motion? Okay, I will roll call that. Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Peter-Eschler.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Pui.
Yes.
And Wharton.
Yes, welcome to Salt Lake City.
And I'm a yes. That. Almost.
Well, it was pretty close.
You're being optimistic. That motion passes unanimously with Councilmember Valder-Morris absent. There is no items in Section F, the unfinished business portion of our agenda, so the last thing is Section G, our consent agenda, and I will look for a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Wharton and a second from Councilmember Fowler. Is there any discussion? I will roll call that. Councilmember Peter-Eschler.
Yes.
Dugan.
Yes.
Wharton.
Yes.
Pui.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes unanimously with Councilmember Valder-Morris absent. And that was a very fast meeting. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Excellent job, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I second that.